Hi everyone, welcome to Riot Anatomy. I'm Adele, for those new trainees who don't know me, and I'm coming to you live from Seattle at the University of Washington, where I'm doing my graduate work. And we're trying an experiment this fall of teaching anatomy via a flipped classroom model. So this is a total experiment, bear with us, and please give us feedback. The idea of, just to explain a little bit for those of you who didn't hear me say this before I left, the ideas from which this flipped classroom model arose have been around a while, and you can read up on it online, but Wikipedia says that it's arising from the importance of the use of class time for the construction of meaning rather than information transmission. So class time for construction of meaning rather than information transmission. So the idea that in traditional educational models, often the teacher will stand up during the class, right, and lecture or deliver this information to the students that they're expected to absorb in one sitting, right? And then they go home, and over the course of the week before the next class, they work on problems and integrating the information and their workbooks and what have you, in terms of trying to synthesize and integrate the information they learned in class. So the idea with a flipped model is that it's the opposite. So your homework, if you will, is to dive into the material, into the information before you get to class, and then spend the active class time at Riot constructing meaning with your peers, with your teachers. The idea was sort of more recently popularized by these science teachers who were studying how to use technology in the classroom, and with this idea that as technology becomes more and more a part of how we're educating people, we would like for technology not to be doing what humans can do better, right? And we'd like humans not to be doing what we could expedite or make more efficient with the amazing technology we now have. So these science teachers developed this way of teaching where they video recorded lectures of themselves delivering information to their students, and then the students could watch that, rewatch it, watch it in the morning, watch it at night, right? And consult with the supplementary materials provided, and Google and whatever else you find helpful, one finds helpful in their learning process. And then we can spend class time working together in groups, integrating the material, learning or using the resources of being humans and human beings in relationship to each other to further integrate and synthesize the information. So we thought it would be a really great way, A, to keep me connected to you guys, and B, to use this approach with the Alexander technique and with anatomy, because what we do with Alexander is so experiential and is so much about experiencing information and knowing information through experience. So, yeah, I think that's it. Again, yes, this is an experiment, so your feedback is encouraged. The material that I'm going to be presenting comes out of what we've been doing at Riot for the last 2 years, Nanette and I, in terms of building an anatomy curriculum for Riot. And both Nanette and I have studied pretty extensively with Amy Matthews, so a lot of the material we use will come from stuff Amy does. And Amy is trained through body-mind centering as well as Laban, but a lot of her teaching is influenced by body-mind centering, or BMC, which is the work of Bonnie Bainbridge Cohen. So we'll be drawing from that, as well as books and written work from other authors. So in the Riot library on site, we've got the David Gorman books we'll be using. They're really great. He's an Alexander teacher who did these beautiful anatomy books. There are 3 volumes called The Body Movable. Yeah, so take a look at those. We'll also, Tom Myers is another one. He wrote Anatomy Trains. We'll be looking at his stuff, and various other people as we go along. So the videos will be posted to Google Classroom along with any written, resources you'll need or images to the Google Classroom. So, yeah. And I'm not great with technology myself, but the idea is that this Google Classroom is an interactive portal for us to all share information about what we're learning and as it relates to anatomy and Alexander. So you're encouraged, if you can figure out how to do it, to contribute to the portal, upload articles or thoughts or images that you found that you think are helpful or would help deepen and deepen our discussion and deepen this sort of, community. Community. Deepen this community of learners and practitioners. So I think it's exciting, and again, just that because this is such an experiment, all these materials, the videos and the content you find on Google Classroom is intended just for Riot trainees and teachers. So please don't share with people outside our community for now. Okay, so so what is Riot Anatomy, or what are we trying to uniquely do here? We've been talking a lot about that, and I think a lot about that. And we wanted to start with this idea that the Alexander technique is fundamental to how we know our own anatomy, to how we know anatomy, right? So I feel like anatomy is often studied in relation to other techniques like yoga or Pilates or dance, and anatomy is this other thing that we learn to help better our skill or help us better understand our practice and give us more information. Totally valuable, totally awesome to use anatomy in relationship to, in conjunction with any practice or sport or pursuit. But what we're proposing is that the Alexander technique offers a more holistic approach, if you will, that it being fundamental to how we be, right? That the Alexander technique is actually fundamental to how we know ourselves and know our anatomy, and offers a means whereby, right, through our practice and process of the Alexander technique, a means whereby we can come to know ourselves and to know our own anatomy in that way. So, yeah, let's see. And to this end, related, I really like reminding people that anatomy isn't this other thing, right? And it's definitely not something we have to do, right? And that's a nice parallel, I think, with Alexander too. So I often, in my Alexander teaching, will use the analogy with students of being like an archaeologist or on an archaeological dig, right? Where we're looking to uncover, reduce the interferences, get out of the way of, align with that which is already there to be revealed, that which is already there. So we don't have to do our anatomy or even understand it for it to be there working for us, but we can consciously work to get out of our own way so that we can experience that which is already happening, that which is already there for us. So we are going to be looking at anatomy as this thing that it's not a thing, it is, right? And looking at our anatomy from the perspective of reducing interferences and aligning with and participating with that being that is our anatomy, that is us, that is already happening. Yeah? Okay, so I wanted to sort of along these lines of how we engage with ourselves, right? How we understand our anatomy by and through this process of engaging with ourselves. I thought it would be really helpful to start with this map, if you will. It comes from BMC, from Body Mind Centering, and I think it's called it's a map for the embodiment process. So I'm just going to explain it a little bit. I hope you can see it okay in the video. If not, let me know and I can upload an image to Google Classroom. Okay. So these are all, or these three sort of, they're not so distinct as they might look. These are three possible ways or points of entry into our experience. And I'm just going to talk a little bit about each of them. So this one, visualization / imagination, and I'm kind of putting thinking in here, but I think thinking can probably, well, you let me know what you think about thinking and directing and the kind of thinking we use in Alexander. I think it's an interesting question, if it belongs here. Anyway, so the idea with visualization and imagination is when we use our brains, our minds, to find an image or find an idea and map that onto ourselves, onto our experience. So it might be looking at a picture of a pelvis, and being like, oh, that's what a pelvis looks like. Can I try that on myself and see what that's like? Or it could be using your imagination. Oh, gee, I wonder what it would, if I could imagine what it feels like for my bones to be soft. So that's sort of an idea or an imaginative idea that then I layer onto myself and go looking for. So our brain is sort of guiding our experience, if you will, from the outside in. So brain as guide, brain as director, as a way into embodying, experiencing ourselves. So then we have somatization here. I don't want to say it's the next step, if you will, because it's not hierarchical. And again, you can, all of these are points of entry, and we're always kind of moving between them. So I'm saying them in this order, but I don't mean to say them in a hierarchical way. But the idea is that one possible sort of transition or shift from this visualization, imagination way of engaging is what they call somatization or somatization. Don't know how you say it. And the idea with that is that the brain is more of a suggester, right? And then a witness to your experience. So for example, I know that I have sits bones, right? And I'm going to look for those sits bones and see what happens when I allow the weight of my sits bones to really find the chair. I'm going to see what it's like when I remember where the top of my spine is and imagine the condyles of my skull resting on the atlas at the top of my spine. What happens, right? So I suggest something and then I see what happens. I follow where my body or where my experience takes me via the power of that suggestion, if that makes sense. Let me just see if there's anything I want to say. Somatization is witnessing. So from outside in, taking an idea and then looking for it, processing, watching yourself. So there, the senses alert and participating in communicating a rich variety of sense data. For example, sensing one's peripheral vision, sounds of the middle ear, weight, movement of the breath, contact with the ground, etc. So I think in my experience, I'm here a lot when I'm sorting out my own, in an Alexander context, when I'm sorting out what's going on with myself, where I'm interfering, what's happening with my primary control, what's happening with my breathing, what's happening with my support. I'm here a lot, suggesting something, asking a question, and then listening to what happens when I when I follow that information. Does that make sense? So it's sort of taking an idea from the outside in and then following what happens. And moving to this sort of way of knowing or way of experiencing ourselves, embodiment. And the idea with this is that the brain sort of falls away as guide or as witness. And in this sort of, you might say, state of more pure, I don't love the word pure, but being, where the body is informing what is informing the brain. Yeah? So I had something I wanted to say that was nice. Yeah, listening in but not directing. No watcher, no modulator. The body leading. So, and I think I don't want to speak for everyone. I think this is a place where we can live in our Alexander practice, where we'd like to live, maybe, where it's almost, there's not language for this kind of experience. It's an interior generation of an almost pre or post verbal experience. And I think this is particularly interesting when we're talking about Alexander, because often students will come in and they've had an experience and they don't know what happened and they don't really have words for what happened, but they know something happened. And that's a really exciting and potentially unsettling place to be, because I think we don't have language for it, and we don't have a lot of structure around talking about these kinds of experiences. But I think they're very much a part of how we know ourselves. And yeah, so I hope that makes sense. Again, I'm having trouble finding language around. Around this one as well. But I think the idea is that these are all different ways of knowing ourselves, different ways of experiencing our anatomy, ourselves, and they're all valid, and they're always changing, and yeah. I think that's all I want to say about that. So in your class with Nanette and Peggy, you're going to talk more about this. But I just want you to think about this week your own process of engaging with yourselves and where you see yourself entering into your embodiment experience or your embodiment process. And maybe where you see, relative to your Alexander practice, or relative to thinking about anatomy, or relative to whatever, your general experience, maybe where you feel comfortable, what feels familiar, what feels a little murkier, and thinking about how the Alexander technique, or how our sensory appreciation as we study and as we go deeper into the Alexander technique also affects how we engage with ourselves on each of these levels. Okay, so, so this is one map, if you will, and we talk a lot at Riot, or Nanette will use this phrase that the map is not the territory. I love that, and it's from, so you know who said that. Alfred Korzysky, Korzyski. He was one of the founders of the field of general semantics. So he said the map is not the territory. So this is a map, right? And anatomy itself we can think of as a map, right, for understanding our anatomy. But we don't want to mistake the map for the territory itself, right, for the experience of having an embodied self. And just remind ourselves that the embodied self is the territory, right? The map is not the territory. Also, I love this saying from, I don't know, it's been credited either to Rumi or various other Buddhist people. It says, all instruction is but a finger pointing to the moon, and those whose gaze is fixed upon the pointer will never see beyond. All instruction is but a finger pointing to the moon, and those whose gaze is fixed upon the pointer will never see beyond. So I want to suggest all of this information I'm giving you and the information you read about your anatomy and about the Alexander technique, right, as all guideposts, signposts, pointers towards the moon, if you will, but not the moon itself. And that the moon itself is your own experience, is your own embodied experience, and that is the authority, right? That is the authority, not me. God knows not me as the teacher, not the material you read in books, not the pictures you see, not the anatomy experts you read about or watch online. That the authority is your own experience, is your own embodied anatomy. Yeah, so to that end, I put on Google Classroom an article that I came across in my learning theories class I took this summer here at the university by this woman, Eleanor Duckworth, who was a student of Jean Piaget, educational philosopher guy. And she talks about all the different ways that she uses the moon as the material and the authority in a class she teaches. And anyway, I won't say more about it, but read it. I think you'll find it really interesting, both as sort of an entry point into how we're looking at anatomy this term, and also as a great way to kind of kick off fall term at Riot and start thinking about who we are and what we're doing as teachers. I think it's a great article. So read that, and also, if you want to read ahead, next lesson, we're going to look at a chapter from Mabel Todd's book, The Thinking Body. So that's up on Google Classroom too, if you want to get a head start on that. And yeah, so thank you for listening to me yammer on, and you'll have an in-class exploration where you can ask questions and go deeper into some of this stuff and give feedback to Nanette and Peggy on, I guess, Saturday. And I'll be back with you next time. So thanks for listening. Good to see you all. And I think that's it for today.